Crazy story coming out of the Washington Post. Pentagon opens sweeping review of clandestine psychological operations.
Holy crap.
Complaints about the U.S. military's influence operations using Facebook and Twitter have raised concerns in the White House and federal agencies. How about that?
What?
Luke?
Yeah.
How about that?
You're right.
I saw the story. I did a report on it earlier today, and Facebook and Twitter surprisingly also took action on this and removed accounts that were running what is being described here by even the Pentagon, U.S. psychological operations that were being run on the American people. These were clandestine psyopses that were, of course, pushing a narrative, pushing an agenda, using your tax dollars to open up social media accounts in order to brainwash the American public. This is an extremely dangerous story.
Let me read this. The researchers did not specify when the takedowns occurred, but those familiar with the matter said they were within the past 2 or 3 years. Some were recent and involved posts from the summer that advanced anti-Russian narratives citing the Kremlin's imperialist war in Ukraine and warning of the conflict's direct impact on Central Asian countries. Significantly, they found that the pretend personas employing tactics used by countries such as Russia and China did not gain much traction, and that overt accounts actually attracted more followers. So what do you see when you go on Reddit? It is laughable. I'm sorry. There are people who fall for this, but here's the sorting algorithm of the left and the right in the culture war. When you go on Reddit and you see a video of a Ukrainian guy and he's like smoking a cigar and he's laughing and he's like, this is what I think of Russia, haha, and they flip the cigarette and they all high five each other. Like, that's propaganda. You have cyber command, you have psychological operations, you have them producing this content, faking it, so that they can put it out there and convince you that we're better, we're stronger, we're going to win this war. Now, I don't have an issue with it to a certain degree, but it is extremely annoying often when you know these videos are outright propaganda. And then what happens? Now we're seeing Vladimir Putin raining these incendiary devices all over cities, threatening to mass mobilize the entirety of Russia, and that there's fear he could potentially open a second front, maybe Finland, we don't know. But all the propagandists in the military keep doing is saying Ukraine's winning, Russia's losing, Russia can't win. And then Russia isn't even using their pinky in this conflict. They're, to be fair, they're getting pushed back. Ukrainian forces with NATO's assistance are advancing. All that's true. But what they want you to do, they want you to believe that Russia could never win for morale reasons. They want people to put up the Ukrainian flags. We drive down here in Virginia. There's a little small town you got to drive through when you're passing through. And they have big, we stand with Ukraine. And I'm like, you couldn't point to where Ukraine was on a map.
Right.
Yeah. It is psychological operations to convince the American people to support mass spending of war.
Yeah, all of this as, of course, Western politicians like Boris Johnson are on record telling Zelensky not to come to negotiations, not to offer peace, not to try to stop the conflict. This was another bombshell story that I think is definitely worth talking about, is the Western governments telling Ukraine, hey, no peace deal, no negotiations here, continue the war. This is a perpetual war that I called out from the very beginning. CNN was telling you it was only going to last a few days. I was telling you, hey, it's probably going to last a few years, might even last 10 years, might even last forever, with the way that, of course, the military-industrial complex is shaping itself and the way that they've been funding themselves and the way that the stocks have been, of course, increasing. But again, these PSY-OP pages here are worth noting because the Pentagon is going to be ordering an audit on the DoD for these psychological operations that are played out on the American people. And this is what we know about. What don't we know about? What else is happening behind the scenes when it comes to psyops? Since, of course, again, information has been weaponized, and it has been weaponized against the best interest of the American people.
One thing is talking plasma, where they fire lasers into the sky and coordinate a bunch of different lasers to get a ball of plasma, and then they move it around and say it's a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and they're freaking people out, making them think that there might be aliens.
Well, this is what they did in Vietnam. Short-lived. They played audio recordings of people wailing, saying, I'm trapped here forever. Run home to your kids. Don't be like me. And it freaked even the South Vietnamese out. So
I think they're doing massive comments on videos too. So when you check your feed and you're like, this is the response. Okay, this is the thoughts of the day. That's psyops.
I think Reddit was taken over a long time ago.
Twitter, I'm sure, YouTube. It's they can't control it. People are coming from outside and using the platform.
This is why Twitter, they're trying to implement algorithmic feeds, because then they can justify controlling people, which is a point you often make about knowing the code to prevent this kind of thing. Because if you don't know what the code's doing, you don't know how Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit are manipulating you to twist your thoughts to make you compliant. But I'll tell you one thing. There's a story I read recently. I know you guys probably heard about mass graves in Ukraine. Did you guys hear this story?
No, actually, I don't
Did you hear
think
this?
so.
I heard a lot of different stories about mass graves in Europe.
So
there's a lot.
you've got two factions in a war. Obviously, we as Americans are expected to support Ukraine because NATO and all that stuff. But there's two stories. The story from the West is that the Russians created mass graves. The story from Russia and Eastern sources is that Russia told Ukraine to collect their dead and Ukraine refused, so the Russians gave them proper burials. Choose who you believe. I don't believe Russia's narratives. It's the same BS. Their military, their psychological operations are going to be coming at us the exact same as the U.S. will. It is a battle for your mind. It is fifth generational war.
Absolutely. And the first casualty of war is truth. And I think you can't believe anyone because everyone has an invested interest in using information for their own personal benefit. But at the end of the day, we have seen a concerted effort to push for a perpetual proxy war that there is no end to, that endangers all of Europe, that is creating an energy crisis, that is creating a scarcity problem, that is creating a food famine problem for a lot of the people in the world who are the poorest people in the world. And this is something that is absolutely mind-boggling because even coming to the table and saying, hey, there should be negotiations, there should be peace deals, we should be incentivizing the end of this conflict in some shape, form, or way where we could actually come to the table and actually negotiate a stop to this utter madness, because politicians sending people to die for their political ambitions is one of the stupidest idea in recorded human history, and it needs to end and it needs to stop, and it stops when the people stop complying. And I think this is an important message that I think a lot of people need to hear, and sadly you don't hear it on Reddit, you don't hear it on social media, you don't hear it on the corporate media, you don't hear it by government officials, you hear the opposite of that, and this is why this conflict is going to continue.
But they're losing. I think
the information war, you mean?
Well, but Annie Leibovitz got a very beautiful photo shoot.
Yeah,
that's what's important.
Really?
That's
Tell me about that.
Really the most important thing.
It's a joke. Vogue did a whole spread on the first lady of
Zelensky and his
Ukraine.
wife.
Yeah.
Jeez.
In the war-torn country, she's like sporting beautiful pea coats. It's pretty tone deaf.
I don't know if it's true, but I heard that Zelensky was wearing these like Nikes. Did you guys see that?
I did
like
not.
really nice shoes. I mean, he's allowed to have nice shoes. It's fine, whatever.
He's very
But I
British.
think we're winning, and I think back to the Bush years. Didn't the Dixie Chicks, they like criticized Bush and then
Yes.
they got canceled or whatever?
Yep.
Everyone's like, you gotta support the troops.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's creepy how the institutions and the establishment are waving Ukrainian flags and well, we'll keep it family friendly. I was going to say something, uncouth, but just abiding by the cult narrative in support of the war. But shows like this can exist where we just say screw your war and screw you, and that's something that's powerful.
It's at least a message out there, but still tragically so many people are losing their lives in Ukraine. So many young people are just having their entire existences wiped out because politicians have ambitions, and that to me is just such a crazy idea. A politician saying, hey, go kill your fellow neighbor right now because I said so.
I think
it's wild that this has happened throughout recorded human history, and it needs to stop.
A lot of it is like utilitarian. They're saying, okay, if we don't invade the Middle East or Afghanistan for that oil, we're going to lose 100 million Americans are going to die from starvation in the next 50 years. So are we willing to sacrifice 2 million people to make sure that the 50 million don't die? And that's the strategy and the planning of resource management. I mean, war is resource management. It's land management and resources.
And it's not just that. It's them saying if we don't go in the Middle East, China will.
That's also, you take that into account.
Right.
Like if we don't invade, someone will, which is a sad
But it's
way
not
to
just
think
that
about
simple.
it.
The U.S. involvement in the Middle East propped up Iran. Iran is as powerful, has more of a sphere of influence because of the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq created ISIS, created radical sectarian violence. If you look at it, it's not as simple. Exactly. They want the chaos. They want the murder. They want the destruction. They don't want the war on terror to end. They want it to continue, and they made sure it continued by radicalizing groups and also pushing people out of the government in Iraq, which literally created ISIS.
Yeah, the
Who
Ba'ath
is
Party.
that guy who was in Congress who was right about everything?
His name was Dr. Ron Paul.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
He's just right about everything.
Yeah.
I love there's a viral video of him going around recently that's actually gone viral several times where he's just calmly explaining what is happening and what will happen based on the things we're doing. And like it all happened.
Yeah.
Blowback, I think, was his term in like 2007. He was very, very vocal about
CIA?
that.
Yeah, I have a T-shirt saying "If I Told You So" was a person with him smiling big on it.
Yeah.
But he called it. He called it, especially when it came to the FBI, the politicization of the FBI that historically has been going on with them abusing their power that they had in Washington D.C. He talked
Patriot
about
Act.
the Patriot Act. He talked about the war on terror. He talked about the war on drugs, and all of those roosters are coming home to roost because he was right dead on the money on so many issues. And it was like he had a magic 8 ball. He predicted all of it, and it all came true. And if we would have listened, the world would have been a better place.
Well, I think what we're seeing with the anti-establishment wave was deeply influenced by him and the Ron Paul revolution back in, I think it was like 2008.
The Tea Party revolution, which was hijacked by Glenn Beck and other kind of stronger neoconservative right-wingers.
But that was Ron Paul or what?
Ron Paul originally was one of the major figureheads behind the Tea Party that was pro-freedom, pro-free speech, anti-war, pro-America. And then a lot of other right-wing figures came over and kind of hijacked it, and it became just like a Republican thing, and it became an establishment thing. But originally it was anti-establishment, anti-U.S. Federal Reserve, anti-imperialism, globalist.
But I'll say this, when I was growing up in the city, everyone's very liberal. We all saw the viral Ron Paul revolution. We saw the stickers everywhere. And I remember seeing it says like revolution and love is backwards or whatever, and like Ron
Revolution.
The Ron Paul love revolution. What a funny! It's so weird. I don't think he came up with that. Some people just started doing it, right?
I think it was viral marketing because his ideas, spurred on so many people to take independent actions. There was people that literally had air balloons that had huge signs, billboards that were just put up without the campaign's coordination. And his message was able to get out there because of grassroots support. He also was supported by U.S. military service members more than any other candidate in that specific election that he was a part of. And he galvanized a lot of people to take independent action without any top-down control, which was very impressive.
I think Ron Paul's influence had a huge impact on our generation because 2008 was something. 2000, and it was for a few years even after that, people were talking about his ideas and what he believed and what he represented and the things that he got right even today. And then there's a lot of people now who have become, they very much were seated with these ideas of libertarian values, anti-establishment, anti-imperialist. Now there's many, many more people who share the views of Ron Paul, not to mention his kids actually in government and carrying on.
It's quite a
that
testament
mission.
to his personality that his child is such an amazing human being. Rand is really incredible.
And boy, does the cult hate it. But it's because of Ron greatly, not completely, that I think we're seeing such a strong anti-imperialist, anti-war, anti-establishment, pro-individual liberties, pro-freedom movement. I think that what he represented and stuck to rippled out. It's unfortunate that Bernie Sanders ultimately caved to the establishment in the end because he could have stood for something on the left in a similar way.
I got to talk to you guys about.
And he kissed the ring and he bowed down and they screwed him over and they slapped him around and he said, "Please give me more." And it was disgusting to see exactly him just give up and screw over all of his followers. He had grassroots support too. He had individuals saying, "Hey, I don't need to be paid by anyone. I don't need to be organized by anyone. I stand for his ideas that represent the middle class, the blue collar working class of this people." And then at the end of the day, he pooped on all of them. Let's just be real with ourselves.
I'm trying to put my mind in the state of someone in the government in control of the war machine and why they're doing it. Because I'm very anti-war. I'm very like, yo, get the troops out of the Middle East. We shouldn't be invading people. End of story. Killing is wrong, very kind of black and white. And then I start to think like, well, wait. If there's a military, if there are resource management issues and the American people really are running out of resources or are projected to, that unless we invade and take them from somewhere else, where does good and evil starts to lose?
That's not true. That's a notion that is absolutely made up. That is a notion that is absolutely ridiculous and has no sense at all.
Dude, we're not murder the savages.
We're not taking the resources in. No one took the resources in Afghanistan. The Chinese are taking the resources in Afghanistan after the United States gave it to them on the silver platter. Are we taking any resources from Libya? No, we just brought back slavery to that country. There's no conquest of resources. Ian.
British
there's none of that. There's no. It's not as simple as you think it is.
I think it might not be as simple, but the British took North America and took the resources on the east coast of this continent, and then they murdered 90% of the Native American population, calling them savages, didn't even consider them human for the resources. And now we have one of the most bountiful resource country on the earth.
You're technically wrong. It was individuals doing it all. The crown. I was reading about the War for Independence recently, and I was like, I wonder what King George III, I think, said when he received the Declaration of Independence. He ignored it. He handed it off to some other guy and said, "I don't know, you deal with it." They didn't care. The crown didn't care. He thought of the colonies as a nuisance. What it was individuals trying to find a better life. They were leaving Europe. The colonization was, in some ways, you had elements of trade. And the crown was like, there's riches to be had. But what people don't understand about colonization is that it's best represented by what we're seeing now with China. Regular people in China move to other countries. They create lives there. They grow, they expand, they create businesses, they gain influence. That's colonization. The colonists from Europe came to the Americas to find a better life. It was crowded. A lot of them weren't succeeding in Europe. They said, I'd be better off in a new frontier. And those individuals created cities, created colonies, and had conflict with the natives, and they favored themselves over the natives who lived there. So it's not like the crown was just like, there's people there, let's have all of our people go and crush them by order of the king.
Yeah, they just wanted the resources, the tobacco and
but it's individuals,
the cotton.
individual companies, individual people.
Yeah, it was resource greed. I mean, maybe not greed. Maybe that's just the nature of humanity is more resources, more people. And if you don't get more resources, then you're going to starve.
Exactly. You take two dogs and you put them in a cage. And they're both hungry, and you throw in one chicken. What's going to happen? Are they going to share?
So now,
they're probably not.
My thoughts on conquest is like is shaken. I'm not so like no more war, never. Everyone be peaceful now. I just don't. It seems too pie in the sky.
It is. I think the problem I have with the United States is they've never justified, at least in my lifetime, any of their wars. They claim they have justification, but it's always some weird bunk reason they keep lying to us about. So my attitude is, you do not get my consent in a government that is granted that is supposed to have the consent of the governed. You don't have my consent to lie to me to justify why I should do work, pay you taxes so you can go blow up kids, Barack Obama. There's no justification for that. You want to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is worthy of death, you have to prove it. And they've not done that.
So if they were
keep just saying, I think it's the petrodollar. I think it's they want a unipolar world because they don't want to deal with competition. They don't want a world war. It's the liberal international economy. It's this, we're better off with the power. Otherwise, it would be worse.
Yeah.
And that does not grant you the right to execute people in other countries, or for these people in the Middle East, these little kids come out of their houses and they see drones flying overhead and they never know when that drone is going to blow them up. Is a psychotic way to force people to live. They do not have my consent for that.
Yeah, if they were honest, they wouldn't have everyone behind these larger ideas and these larger conquests and these larger acts of murder. Because if they were honest, they would be like, hey, we're just trying to get some money here. We're a hammer. Everything's starting to look like a nail. We need to make some profit here. And Ian, they're not going for resources and bringing you back resources. They're not doing that. They're helping their friends in the military-industrial complex. There's no bid contracts. There's the weaponization of the U.S. military that, of course, is in private hands that only take care of those private hands and even screw over the soldiers that volunteer themselves because they think they're fighting for freedom and democracy. They're not.
And you know why? One of the reasons so many people wanted Donald Trump, just one of the reasons, is that whether or not you actually care about those kids coming out of their little houses and seeing another drone flying overhead and wondering when they'll blow up, maybe you're thinking like, I don't know about those kids. I don't care. I'll tell you this, that drone and the $50 million that equipped it could have gone to your town, to your schools, to your roads, to your industry, to your jobs. And instead it's being siphoned away by a bunch of morons who will want a nation built in Afghanistan, screw the whole thing up and then hand it over to China.
Money-hungry murderers. Let's just be real with ourselves.
Maybe, but
they
maybe
know no
it's-
bounds when it comes to destroying and killing other people, and they'll do it to the tune of hundreds of thousands, millions, and they have done it before.
Collateral damage.
Why?
Because
Why do you
they
think?
don't want the
What
Americans...
resources did you get from Syria? What resources did you get from Afghanistan? What resources did you get from Libya? Tell
think
me.
oil.
What resources did you get from Somalia?
No, we didn't.
No,
I mean,
we didn't.
As far as I learned in Iraq, for instance, there were lots of oil
We
fields.
get oil from Saudi Arabia, and we still finance their lethal genocide of the people in Yemen.
which is a proxy war. So
Yes.
that's where we're getting oil from Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, like oil.
But
and if we ran out of oil here, people would start eating each other.
No,
But we haven't.
under Donald Trump, we were near energy independence. And I know it was a pandemic and demand was way down, but gas in some areas dropped below $2. But on average, it dropped way down. And Donald Trump was moving us towards energy independence. We are able to do it. Now, Joe Biden's doing the opposite. He's shutting down pipelines. He's saying no to fracking. Environmentalists got a problem with it. But I'll tell you what the administration, what the Democrats, what the Uniparty's done. They don't like the pollution here. They outsource it to China.
Yep.
So what they do is they say, we're going to pass all these environmental regulations, so you can't do anything dirty here. How do you solve for that then? The only way to manufacture is to manufacture in China where they don't care about pollution. So what does Donald Trump do? He says, we got to get rid of these regulations on the environment. so that companies can actually come back and start manufacturing, so that Americans can have jobs, so that Americans can send their kids to good schools, if you want to do that these days, considering how bad schools are, so that we can be energy independent, so that we can use our own resources. We have the entirety of Alaska. They won't go near. We had a joke here with Jack Posobiec and Daniel Turner. Occupy Alaska, invade Alaska. It's territory that we purchased from Russia. It's there, it's open, and it is massive. It is huge. But for some reason, we're better off shutting down our own energy production, outsourcing all of our jobs to other countries, and then getting involved in wars in an attempt to justify why we need the resources from them. What's happened now with Ukraine and Europe is that we're seeing 45% inflation in Germany, which is insane. I think from the last month, year over year inflation now, it's this major spike. They've made themselves dependent on Russia, and Donald Trump was like, you shouldn't do this. Instead of solving the problems, they just passed the buck until it got too hot, and now everything's falling apart in their incompetent hands.
Was it like, you shouldn't be relying on Russia, you should be reliant on us?
You should be paying your fair share and figuring out a way to, I don't know, how about this? Don't shut down your nuclear plants. And he's like, why are you doing this? Start shoring up your energy needs. You can't just sit here and let Russia dictate how much you pay. That was the problem. Russia, through Gazprom, was able to dictate massive prices. So the U.S. was like, instead of doing any of that, let's just build pipelines down here through Syria, one of Russia's allies. War emerges from this. The U.S., in my opinion, was very happy to see the rise of ISIS because it was destabilizing Syria. So instead of actually dealing with the problem, the Democrat administration was going, oh, geez, oh no, these terrorists, they're just growing. Donald Trump gets in, ISIS crushed, Ukrainian conflict dissipating. Biden gets back in, all of a sudden, Middle East destabilization, Syria's hot once again, the fall of Afghanistan, and war in Ukraine. These people are psychopathic morons, and they think, to go back to what you said, it was a good question. If you thought a crazy person was going to take over, do you think it's right to hack an election or whatever? These Democrats think they're justified in Russiagate, Ukrainegate, and all this other nonsense because Trump is crazy, but the people supporting this are just being treated like mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed crap by the corporate press and by the politicians who just want power and don't want to actually roll up their sleeves and do hard work. The reality of the United States is that if we brought the jobs back, lives would get so much better for the working class. But those powerful elites, they wouldn't be able to exploit slave labor in foreign countries, so their net worths would go down. They don't like the idea of closing the gap of wealth inequality in this country. They would rather own the industry, send the jobs to China, pay $1 an hour, make tons of cash extracting and exporting our jobs and wealth to a foreign country. Meanwhile, the American people suffer for it. And then we get the opioid crisis, and then we get foreign war, and then they expect you to send your kids over there to die so they can keep that system going. Donald Trump comes in, and for all the things wrong with the man that is worthy of criticism, he says, hey, let's not do that. And people are like, okay, a start. You know, we had Dave Smith on the show. I'm a big fan. He's an awesome guy. And someone commented, and it was brilliant. They said, Dave says what Trump did was still bad, and that shouldn't be the standard by which we vote. And I agree, but someone commented, this problem was created over 100 years, and it's going to take a decent amount of time to solve. We can't just expect a 100-year problem to be erased. And I think Donald Trump was bringing a lot of solutions. The Abraham Accords, no new wars. These things were good. Bringing jobs back to America, bringing energy back to America, making this country about itself. Being like, we shouldn't be the world police. We shouldn't be blowing up kids, sending our kids. We should say, we're going to clean our own room. We're going to make our country better, and we're going to encourage a rising tide so that everybody's ships will rise. Instead, what we have is the Clinton Foundation, the liberal international economy, or the liberal world order, as they call it, saying we should be in charge of everyone because we're better men. I disagree. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.